Welcome to the show that explores the methods and strategies on rocking the financial side of your music business. With over 40 years combined experience, here are your hosts, Chris Webb and Dave Tampkin.
Welcome to Musicians Tip Jar, where we talk about musicians and money. Where more than anything, we want to be your connection to the opportunities that you desire. I'm Chris Webb, joined by my co-host and one of the most connected people I know, Dave Tampkin.
Thanks for having me back, Chris. Being friends with people like you that make me feel so connected. So thanks for the opportunity.
I do think that connection is such an organic thing when it's because you feel good being connected. Like you said, that is the best way to be a connected person, is to just lean into the fact that it feels good to be connected.
Say connected one more time. I think this episode, everyone, if you're over the age of 21, and drink something fun.
Today, we complete our interview with the singer-songwriter Brenden James. We cover being ready, crowdfunding, and sustaining your career while balancing the things that you value most. Our quote today comes from our guest Brenden James. He said, "If you're a young artist, I think there is great value in not having a backup plan for a few years, as scary as it is."
This week's nonprofit also comes from Brenden James. Horseplay Hippotherapy believe that the therapeutic value of horses in learning, especially for children and adults with disabilities. They believe in the therapeutic value of horses in learning, especially for children and adults with disabilities. Horseplay provides an enriched learning environment, cultivating personal growth, development, and self-esteem through success in therapy, therapeutic riding, and horsemanship skills. Learn more at horseplay.club.
That's super cool. You know, I was just seeing a program that they just started somewhere in an East Coast prison. These cats that were going to be euthanized are now inmates can, based on their good behavior, earn one of these cats to come live with them now instead of being euthanized. And it's been very successful because they were better behaved and they were happier. They were then connecting with their family members externally, outside of prison more and being more communicative. It's like all this great benefit from the therapeutic element of these cats being there in the prison with them.
That is awesome. And then they have those cats, from their perspective, have 24-hour care of someone just
totally
shedding love on them.
Yeah, instead of dying.
Yeah.
Definitely a win for everyone. Brenden James is an American singer-songwriter in the pop folk genre who has reached the #1 spot on iTunes multiple times. He's accrued more than 1 million fans in 65 countries on Spotify and has played on multiple formats of American and European radio. He has collaborated on tours with the likes of John Mayer, John Legend, Cat Stevens, Keb Mo, and Andy Grammer, and has songs that have been placed in over 15 major television shows and films worldwide. Penning songs on the topics of love, optimism, political enlightenment, simplifying, self-empowerment, marriage equality, raising a family, aging, and adventuring aimlessly through the natural world, James has left no stone unturned in his 6 studio albums to date, and in his words, "I've only just begun." Brenden is very open and giving in his story, and we pick it back up right after hearing him tell the journey of being an independent after 2 major label deals let him go. This is when his biggest career success actually started. So he gives us advice on carving out your own long, happy career. So take some notes. Let's go.
So there I am learning lessons again. It's like 2011. It was a crazy first 6 years, guys. It's crazy.
Is that when you decided to simplify? Would you say?
That's about a year and a half before I finally simplify. Was a pivotal moment in my life because I was so independent, and I was like, I want to write the songs that no one's telling me to write, if I just work so hard on my own internal voice and artistry, what comes out? And I'm just so proud of that album for the words alone and the simplicity of the songs and how we funded it. You know, I did Kickstarter for the first time after all these years of labels and stuff. Just doing Kickstarter was so rewarding on so many levels.
And forgive me for our listeners right now, because Brenden and I do know each other. When I say, you know, is that when you decided to simplify? That's when you took it into your own hands. And so everyone knows he has an album that he self-funded, like he just said, through Kickstarter, called Simplify. And can you share the benefits there where you felt through the, I guess, the challenges of crowdfunding to finance your own project? Did you treat that differently?
Yeah.
You had the money up front?
I feel like when I think of the challenges of crowdfunding, especially back then, maybe still now, number one, it's hard for artists to ask sometimes. It was hard for me to just say, oh my gosh, I'm about to make a whole campaign, stare into this camera, and just straight up ask people for money. And that's just not a good feeling. And many people around me were like, dude, you can't look at it like that. You have to look at it like, what are you offering? You have to look at it like, think of some great things that you're going to offer your fan base so they'll pay for those things. Don't look at it like you're just asking for cash. So that was one obstacle for me. I think another tough thing about it is it's a ton of work. You know, it's a ton of work on you and whoever is unlucky enough to be helping you, because just the setup alone, I think they've made it a lot easier these days, but it just takes time. If you're going to make money like that, it's going to take time. So that's another obstacle. But once you overcome them, the benefits are huge. I mean, biggest benefit was probably like the engagement and actually connecting to my real fans and seeing who donated what and who bought what and what their comments were. And it was so rewarding to just hear how much belief there was in me and my music. So that was a cool thing about it.
That has to be a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, like, oh, there's a community around me. They want me to do this. They are going to give me money. They want me to keep doing this. Like, wow, how encouraging is that? Compared to the vacuum that record label feeling was for me. Mm-hmm. This vacuum of like, I'm in this fancy studio with all these fancy players and we're apparently making something super fancy, but who knows who it's for? Who knows? Who knows how it's all going to come to be? And then later in your life, when you're indie and you have fans, it just feels so real. You know, it's mm-hmm. much better feeling.
Something you said to me once when you got off stage, and Chris, we were out in Colorado. It was some of the corporate gigs that you get hired for that you don't tell anyone that you're playing, but this company hires you, brings you in, and Brenden was playing with Big Head Todd on the Monsters. And it was just such a weird feeling because they really didn't set up the place to have their employees like right in front of the stage at the time Brenden went on. And it was a little weird. And he played the show and I've heard him play hundreds of times. And I said, great job afterwards. And he looked at me, he's like, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And I know we could talk freely about this because we're musicians, but I just felt like you telling me I did okay was you're telling me I can breathe, but I'm feeling like I'm drowning. And I was like, what a powerful thing to say, because you're up on this stage and you're doing the best you can, but yet you came all this way, regardless of what you're getting paid for. You want to connect with your audience. And if the company's not putting you in a position to do that, that's difficult too. And I thought, well, how many people, from what you just said, like as an indie musician, you do feel that way sometimes. When you get that opportunity to connect with your fans and your friends and your family that do believe in you and can say those sweet things and say thank you for writing the music that you do, sometimes you can forget about that and feel like they're telling you can breathe, though. You feel like you're drowning, but these people are there to tell you that you can breathe. And being a musician, sometimes you're put in that situation and you need to surround yourself with people that believe in you, and you have to believe in others to build that community.
Yeah, it's so true. And there again is so many things to unpack there, even in that, one short story you're telling or reminding me of, because Number one, I was just so full of like piss and vinegar and ambition at that stage. I've done this throughout my career, you know, like I go to these peaks and valleys and I was peaking there. I was like, I want people to hear my music. That was like 2015 or something. And I'm like, I was peaking. And it's so frustrating when you get in front of a huge crowd and you have a great opportunity, but you forget one major tenet of performing, which is, I think anybody who's toured around the country or the world can tell you this. If that's not your fan base in front of you, you can be one of the most talented bands in the fucking world. And it might not matter at all. If they don't know your music, good luck. You might have a couple of shining moments and you might totally be able to win them over. If you're opening for someone and it's a quiet room, like I opened for Kebmo or Susan Tedeschi, and I remember like her fans were so sweet. And it was the same genre, and so you could kind of crush it. But I'm opening for Big Head Todd and the Monsters. It's a corporate event. There's just moments, and now I'm so much more comfortable with these moments. But it doesn't matter how good you think you are or how practiced your band is, like it's just, it might not hit. And that's okay. Now I just did that 3 weeks ago. I played a fundraiser, and no one had heard of me. And I'm like, I already knew going in, I'm like, this isn't going to hit. I'm not going to be able to really be myself and make an impact. And that's okay, because I'm not, these are not my fans. Let me try to make a few fans here tonight. And that's all I need to do, you know? Sorry, that's a real, like, I'm really passionate about that topic. It caused a lot of pain.
But I play a lot of corporate stuff, and it's like from the beginning, it's like we're all just shaking hands, and I'm trying to like get to know them as fast as possible by the end of the show. You know what I mean? Like I feel that struggle every time I play those, so I totally relate. I also have a funny that made me think of the first time that I met you, and you may not remember this, but you were playing at the Soiled Dove, and I got booked to open for you. This was the first time we met. And the reason this came up in my head was because I had not heard of you when I got booked for that show. And I came and opened for you, and my wife came with me, which was the only fan that came to see me, you know? So like, I remember feeling open in for you with that same feeling of like, oh man, this is so hard. And then, you know, it was a great show, and I greatly appreciated it. And the thing that really bothered me though, the next morning, is that somehow your card was on the pillow next to me, next to my wife. With your face on it. And I was like, wait a second. Like, obviously somebody made a new fan.
Wait a minute.
You were peaking then too, you know.
Oh God, apparently. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Well, sorry about that. And it's just wild, the whole playing in front of people who aren't your fans necessarily.
Yeah. But yet it's critical.
Yeah, totally critical. And yeah, you have to do 20% of your shows at least every year are just not going to hit the way you're hoping they are for whatever reason. And you can be so excited about them and so ready, and you can feel healthy and you're ready to give your best. And then just something doesn't work out. And that's what performing is, you know?
You know, what advice would you give to an artist entering the industry?
I was really thinking about my financial setbacks of my career. And to be honest, I mean, I have financial setbacks 3 times a year for the last 18 years. It's not like I remember one moment really being so much worse. I look at the whole damn thing as like a beautiful hustle. And, you know, what I've been trying to do even for my own retirement or long-term plan has always just been to save money the best I can, try to buy a home. I'm now in my second home. I don't own 2 homes, but this is the second home I've bought. And you try to level up each time. And that's the only real way I know as just straight up musician to try to acquire some amount of savings or retirement. And when it comes to my most steady stream of income, since I wrote Simplify and started that first Kickstarter, it's just been touring, and it has been at least 50% from private shows. Home shows, backyard shows, people renting out event spaces in their neighborhood or their town for me, and doing annual shows. And people sometimes ask, like even last year, we'll finish a really fun one and we'll sit around with the hosts at the end of the night and they'll say, I remember this sort of well-off couple was like, what do you need? What do you need? You know, is it money? I'm like, well, always, but I'm not asking for that. What I really need is for you to maybe run this show back with me next year. If you had a good time, like, I'd love to do it again for you next year. And they're like, okay, we can do that. And that's been really important for me, to try to give a really good show and then tell the people that it's really important to me that we do it next year. Cause then then the artist has something as a base for his next year or her next year. And that's helped a lot.
The favorite adventure and one of your newest songs that I really enjoy is about your son being on top of the bus. And
yeah,
you've done a really good job. And I also seen Chris do this as well with his family. And you're both great fathers. Can you tell us about how you balance your professional life of playing music and touring and your personal time with your family?
You know, it's funny to boil it down to this phrase. It's a funny phrase. It's not quite like me, but a few years ago, I boiled it down to, like, I need to kick ass in both things. When I'm doing one, I want to do it so well. And when I'm doing the other, I want to do it equally as well. It's looking at them both as a challenge. They are so important to me. Family is more important. And to be a father, and a good father, has always been a huge goal of mine. And a husband, I could have never, all my Capital, Universal, all the kind of exciting things that I was about to be famous, I had opportunities to be more famous or to get more spotlight. But every time I stepped into them, I would lose a connection with my wife or with my friends. I'd start to turn into a little bit of just that widget person and not a real person. And it just never felt natural or enjoyable for me. And so I have just wanted to live the balance since day one, at the detriment of some of my fame. But I can feel when I'm off balance, and I hate that feeling. So I lean back and I pendulum swing back to the other thing real hard and build that back up. And then I pendulum back into the other. And it's exhausting, and it's probably taking years off my life to just try to do such different things so well. But I really know no other way. It wouldn't work for me any other way.
Well, and as we are talking about work and life balance, I get it that you have to get back to the balance that you do so well. But our last question that we want to throw in here is about advice to new artists or artists that are still drawing up their plans. What kind of financial advice would you give them, knowing that your background has gone through so many ups and downs? These artists that are entering the industry, what would you recommend to them to help sustain their careers?
I'll say a few things that just come right to my mind. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you're a younger artist, I think there's great value in not having a backup plan for a few years, as scary as it is. I think there's great value in understanding you're going to be broke for years, and that as your career takes off, unless you get an investor or you just have trust fund money, I'm not even judging. There are people who have trust fund money they can put into their career. Amazing. But if you don't have that, I think you need to prepare yourself to not have a lot of money at all to do it correctly. And if you do it, if you put your whole self into it, then you really can start making money after a few years of doing it. But don't think you're not going to be broke, and you're not going to be a starving artist. You're going to be the cliche thing if you really want it. So prepare yourself for that. And the other advice I have is always practice your own songs. Record them all the time, even before you release them, and listen to yourself and try to get to your best self before you hit release, before you hit the release button. If you're 22, if you're 27, if you're 33, there's no rush. And what's going to matter is that your shit is sounding really good. So don't rush that process.
Thank you so much for your time and your friendship, and for the music, for the 80 songs that you have on Spotify. And we will put up how to get those, and everyone should listen to them. And it is some beautiful stuff. So highly recommend it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. That was easy and fun, and I would do it again.
Okay, we'll call you in an hour.
So we focus this podcast on simplify. And that's the last thing it does when you go through all the ups and downs of what happens with that album and to get it made. But really, at the end of the journey, simplifying everything and finding his voice is where the success comes.
Mm-hmm. What a value and such a great metaphor that has to our podcast. not just his album itself and all the lyrics and the meaning of behind it all, but for us, for our ability to emphasize the fact that if you really want to do great things, sometimes the main thing you have to do is simplify what it is you're trying to do and ignore the rest. He overcame so many complicated situations and then came out with an album called Simplify. That is just so poetic.
Agreed.
And we briefly talked about crowdfunding and his approach to that. And the one thing that I think we can reiterate again is his emphasis on that it's hard work. Not bad work, not negative, just you have to recognize that if you're trying to earn large numbers in crowdfunding, just like in anything else, it can take a lot of effort on your part to make sure that it's successful. But I think that what really hit home with that conversation was that he said how rewarding the engagement is of being funded through Kickstarter because of the community aspect of it, the feeling of direct to fan connection versus the record label funding, which felt very empty and very alone and very isolated.
Yeah, one transaction.
It makes you realize that it's not really about the money, right? And we know this when it comes to being an artist. We know that it's not about the money. But we think of getting a record deal as being, oh, then I'll have all the funding I need to do the art that I want to do, you know? But if you think about it, he felt more motivated by the support of the community giving him the funds, even though it was far smaller of a fund than the label. That makes you realize that in his heart, he felt more motivated from the smaller funding from a crowd than from a large amount of money coming into his hands without any effort.
He says, if you're going to do this and follow your dreams as a musician, be prepared to be broke. But hardly in his story do we ever feel that he was broke.
Yeah.
Because his life was so enriched with so many different things. Like you said, it doesn't always have to do with the money.
Well, and we hear this over and over again, as hard as it is to wrap your head around and as scary as it is, like in his quote, to be okay with that journey having ups and downs and learning how to plan for those situations is such a fundamental way to not give up, right? We preach this so much here. Our course is all about this. Like, it's not about getting rich as much as it is about never having to quit because of money. And if you, first of all, get the mindset that at first it's going to be tough, that you may have to sacrifice on certain things in order to fund yourself to continue making this pursuit, right? But there's also that idea of planning ahead. Like he said, plan for your future so that you are prepared to take on those certain circumstances where you have less money during those times. It is possible if you plan ahead.
Another thing that came from connection and connecting with all those people that helped the Kickstarter is how many years later now, he's saying that most of his shows are due to those connections. He's flying out playing private shows. He's playing a vineyard somewhere to 500 people because of these relationships that his career continues to move forward with the monetary help from the initial crowdfunding.
And you know, something else to mention there that came up with Megan Burt from our last episode was being willing to ask. And sometimes even when people are offering you help, we're still afraid to ask, you know?
Yeah.
It still feels hard to ask for help, even when they're offering it. And here, what Brenden said so eloquently is that by asking for them to continue an annual or whatever the consistency is of these events, you build sustainability. You naturally create a place in which you can be more confident that you're going to be okay in the coming years and as you continue down this longevity of a career.
Well said.
So the last thing that we wanted to just emphasize from that conversation was the idea of balancing your work and your family, or your work and your personal life. We see a lot of people burn out That's why I think that we need to continue making this a part of this whole conversation that we're always trying to dive into, so that you can make sure that you find some sort of balance in what you do and that it's not all obsessive. we can get very obsessive. It's an artist nuance that we have to control sometimes. And for me, like, I like to have things that are non-music to do. I like to golf, and I'm terrible at it, but it's completely different than playing songs. So it gets me out of that space and it allows me to go do something totally different. And I really enjoy that.
One thing Brenden didn't mention is that he plans trips with his family, much like he would a tour, to make sure that it's downtime for them. I know when his wife was getting, I believe, a different job, and they were moving to a different state, that they had a month off maybe before anyone had to work, and they sold all their stuff and then took that and went on like a European trip. And it was amazing. And so many songs came out of that he could share later, but he focuses on those adventures.
Well, maybe that is part of that balance, is recognizing when you need to push yourself in a different direction, right? Pushing yourself can mean selling stuff and getting rid of things. It can mean shutting down your laptop for the weekend and just being somewhere else. And it can mean going on a trip that is totally new. And even if that requires you to then fund that with other things, balance can be sometimes being willing to listen to what your inner body and your mind is telling you, and not letting yourself get so obsessed with money or with success to the point where you can't find any other inner voice inside of you.
I don't get to see Brad Huffman that much, who I play music with. I'm staying at his place, which I mentioned earlier. And when our Saturday night show was canceled for So Far, we kind of just looked at each other and said, okay, let's just talk about what we had planned to practice for this weekend. And then we got on his mountain bikes and just went to different music venues, went for some drinks over here, got tacos across the street, had some fried pickles at this other place. Like, our idea was we weren't going to eat a huge meal, we're just going to snack. And we never picked up our guitars for the rest of the night. And it was great. And then Sunday came around and we had the same plan to rehearse. He's like, oh, you want to go back to that Fuzzy's taco place and get to Bloody? You know, Brad, I think I do. And he goes, this feels more like vacation than it, was supposed to be all these gigs. And we'll play tonight. But it really was nice just to kind of shut down the stuff that we were supposed to do. And I think we'll play better tonight.
Way to find balance with your community. So our action step for all of you is to go back to that MTJ forecasting tool and look at how your year is panning out. Look at those connections that are giving you those dependable events, that give you those predictable incomes in those coming months. And reach out to events and other opportunities from last year that you want to try to put back in the books again this year. This takes deliberate effort to make these things happen. You'll be surprised if you just reach out to a few of them. At least one of them will probably get back to you and turn into a couple opportunities. So be proactive and you will get more results. If you don't have the MTJ forecasting tool, go ahead and go to their website at musicianstipjar.com and you can grab that. And we know that your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending this time with us and being a part of this community. It's our hope you feel that sense of community here at Musicians Tip Jar. So if you'd like to get a hold of us, what's the best way to do that?
You can send us an email at musicianstipjar@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, musicianstipjar.com, to check out all the resources and discounts we have just for our listeners. You can also check out Brenden James music at brendanjames.com.
If you find this information useful, also make sure you rate and subscribe to the podcast or wherever you're listening to us so that we can help keep you up on the finance side of your music business. As always, thank you for joining us. Remember, there is already enough for everyone. You just need to know how to get it. Until next time, on behalf of Dave Tamkin and myself, Chris Webb, stay happy, healthy, and wealthy. Every day in this noble pursuit of a career in music will bring you that positive energy to defy the laws of gravity. This is Musicians Tip Jar.
Oh Lord, I could use somebody. I could use somebody. I could use somebody.
Nothing on on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, business, or financial professional for individualized advice. Individual results are not guaranteed, and all discussed strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The hosts are operating on behalf of Musicians Tip Jar LLC exclusively.
Could use a little help here. Could use some help. Could use a little help here.